Welcome to Moms on the Ground podcast. I'm your host for today, Angela, sitting with the lovely Melissa, and we've got an exciting person in the house with us today.
Yay. So we're here with Tiffany, and she's a mom from Irvine Unified School District. And she was the person who got the record. If you listen to our previous podcast about the trans student hustle, there was a lot of shady stuff taking place in Irvine that, parents need to be aware of. And that's always our goal, is to educate and to inform parents. You have done an outstanding job of searching public records, and I could not have put together what I put together without all these awesome moms and dads that have helped compile these records. It would be humanly impossible with raising children, having a job, all of this stuff, but we can all do our part. And you and I talked about this yesterday, kind of, even though it's happening in the fits and bursts, like, it doesn't matter, Angela and I were laughing. I wanted her to come on here in her colonial clothing because like she had something with her daughter where she was like a colonial day and she had to be dressed for that. But like, these are our lives. And just because you can't devote, this is not my full-time gig, this is not something that any of us are paid to do, but feel compelled to do because it's important that we take care of the kids. So thank you so much for coming on, Tiffany. And I'll have Angela ask you the questions, but I just want the audience to know that you are the person that found the document that shows that in Irvine Unified, as of June 2023, that there were 110 kids with gender support plans. And the really important part to remember about these gender support plans is that that's like a social transition that's happening.
Yes.
And then you also found the document that showed that they're lying to parents about this.
Exactly.
So, and those documents are attached in our last podcast. But anyway, thank you for discovering that. And tell us your story. Tell us your story.
First of all, thank you, ladies, for having me on today. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing. And just to support what you said, every one of us can play a role and can do something. And then I just want to emphasize that, the greatest blessing in my life is being a mom, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Children, my child is everything to me, but children in general, how can we not look after their innocence?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we not have that desire in our heart to want to protect them and shield them from things that are totally inappropriate for them to be hearing or be exposed to at this young age?
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit about my background and backstory. To be fully transparent, I'm 44 years old. So I've spent some time in the corporate world, but I have one daughter who's 10 years old. And my husband and I, when we were ready to settle down and buy a home, we sought out a place where the public education system would be really good. So we actually moved to California in 2004. So we're about 20 years living in California. And so we explored a lot of different areas in all those years. And ultimately, we decided Irvine was the place. We had researched it. We liked the master plan community. We thought it had strong governance,
Mm-hmm.
good city council,
Mm-hmm.
great parks and recreation. But above all that, when planning for a family, we were really attracted to the public education system.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought, if we settled here, we'll be set. We won't have to worry about private school.
Mm-hmm.
This is the place.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved to Irvine in 2012, and my husband opted to commute for his job because we were so sold on Irvine and the great school system. And then in 2014, my daughter was born. So she's been raised in Irvine, and we started her in, one of the things that I really liked about Irvine is that they have great early ed programs through the public school district. So we started her in those early ed programs when she was 2.5. And we got a lot of value out of just the social interaction she got from those programs. But to be honest with you, looking back, I should have picked up on some signs of what was going on, because this was 2015, 16 timeframe. So Barack Obama was in office, and there were some policies, being imposed that were starting to make their way down to the districts. And I didn't recognize it at the time, but my husband started picking up on it. In fact, he was really concerned how they were constantly asking what your child's race was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he would tell me, don't respond to certain questions, right? And I was like, you're crazy. What they're just doing research, right? How can this be harmful, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, fast forwarding, now understand why he was concerned.
Yeah.
So yeah, then we completed the early childhood learning experience and we were very satisfied. I had great faith in the school district. I felt the school district had strong leadership, a strong board. I honestly didn't see any red flags. So we enrolled her in our neighborhood elementary school,
Mm-hmm.
which was so exciting because it was walking distance from home.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So she started kinder, and this was in 2019, fall of 2019.
Oh.
And it was, and I had ambitions of getting involved at the local school in the PTA. I'll back up a little bit because when she was first born, I was a working mom
Mm-hmm.
for almost the first 2 years. And then I had some health issues. She had some health issues. My husband and I reevaluated our situation, our life plan, and we decided it would be best for me to step out of the corporate world
Mm-hmm.
and focus full time on raising her,
Mm-hmm.
which has been a tremendous blessing. And this way we had her in childcare before, and that's stressful and expensive. And so now I could spend my time with her.
Mm-hmm.
So kindergarten was a lot focused on getting her established and learning how to socialize and properly interact with other kids. Being an only child, you know, it's a little bit different coming into this setting. She had a great teacher. I planned to be really involved in the PTA. And then all of a sudden COVID hit. School shut down.
Mm-hmm.
She was just hitting her stride in school, finally learning how to behave, sit still, listen to instructions, follow direction. She's a strong-willed child. So
I've got one of those.
They all?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I've never met one who isn't.
Not at all. I've seen it.
Okay.
So school shut down, and she's not one who loves learning from me. I mean, she will, but it's like, oh no, she's just barely learning to read and write. And we know that it's a big leap from kinder to first grade.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to figure this out on my own because there was no certainty around when we would get back into the classroom. And our kinder teacher was doing a once or twice a week Zoom for the kiddos, and she was not a Zoom learner.
No.
But I had all the faith in the world in our superintendent, Terry Walker, because he was very visible. He was out there sending communications constantly to offer reassurance to the parents and the community and the students that we are going to get these schools reopened at the soonest possible opportunity. And he was even thinking that they would be reopened by May of 2020.
Yeah.
And I
Wouldn't that have been nice?
So did I. I thought it was going to be 2 weeks, but you know,
Well, they said 2 weeks.
And my daughter was hopeful too. So we were, you know, feeding her that same hope, right? And then a week passed, another week, a month, and now we're at the end of May, and there's no sign that a superintendent has finally acknowledged it's just not going to happen. I'm sorry, but what we are going to do is make sure the schools are open for the start of next school year. But we understand families have different levels of comfort and may have, you know, older members of the family that they're concerned about with this COVID. And we didn't know a lot at that time yet.
Right.
So he wanted to give families the choice of whether to send your kid back in person, full-time, traditional way, have a hybrid model, or virtual. And for us, we were all in about in person. And so I actually had tremendous respect for Mr. Walker at that time because I thought that was a very gracious thing to do. And they honored the request of every parent.
Plus, it just seemed it's logic.
Exactly.
Right? Like it's like he was responding logically.
Exactly.
You know, to normally to an abnormal situation. But then, you know, there were people that wanted to hijack things.
Exactly right. So fast forward to the end of July, actually beginning of August, I distinctly remember hearing Terry Walker have to deliver the unfortunate news that the government or Governor Newsom is not, the California Department of Health and Governor Newsom do not feel it's safe for schools to open. And I thought, oh boy, that's when my faith started to waver a little bit because I honestly thought he would stand up to them and say, no, we're doing what's best for the kids.
Right.
Sorry, state. Sorry, Newsom. We're opening the classrooms because this is Irvine and we have high standards in Irvine and this is what our community is demanding.
And I just want to say, this is what people need to recognize, like how very important the local level is. And this is why we're spending so much time being focused on the school districts, your city council, like the things that you can do that you're being personally affected by locally. So, you know, someone like that has the ability. The people sitting in these seats are extremely important
Exactly right. And so I actually wrote to Mr. Walker because I had been corresponding with him throughout this whole period, and I had commended him for his courage and his candor through all his messaging and communications. But at this point, I was very concerned
Right.
because here we are, I think it was even less than a week before school was supposed to start. The school district was ready. They had all the plans in place for kids to go back to the classroom that whose parents had said that's the model we want, right? So they were ready to go. And so I was corresponding with them and I said, what can I do?
Yeah, you're trying to work in coordination with them. Like I often hear as like a defense of some of these policies and things that these school districts are implementing is that, you know, this is a right-wing extreme thing to try and get rid of public education.
Right.
And what I hear over and over again is the commitment of parents and how much people believe in the public education and if you know, offered to partner with. The thing about you, Tiffany, that I'm struck by is like you're highly intelligent. You're very logical. You know, you sent me videos of some public comment. The things that you're asking for are not unreasonable. When people start throwing names, you know, calling you hate, saying that you're just some, you know, right wing.
Right.
It's important to recognize. Don't react to that, but just, you know, just answer it by saying, no, that's not true. Like, I'm logical. This is normal. Don't be silent.
Exactly.
So then, okay, proceed. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you for saying that. We're all owed the truth. We're all owed transparency. And it's our duty to hold our public officials to account on that. And I felt like that was the first sign of betrayal that I was starting to sense. So that although I was corresponding with Walker, and I do believe it was his responses to me were genuine and sincere, he was saying, it's out of my hands. You can encourage others and you yourself to send letters to the state. And I knew all the names of the state officials and our local legislators, our local senator. And I did everything I possibly could do. And he offered the assurance that we'll get through this and it's only going to be temporary.
But the thing that I learned is that the board, and we see in other districts, the board and the council can do things
They absolutely can. They so often rely on excuses or an easy out because they don't want to have to face the consequences of their decision. If they're positive consequences, sure, they're all in. But if they know there's any risk involved or there might be negative consequences, negative PR.
The thing that's so sad about this is at the end of the day, you've got to look yourself in the mirror and say, why am I sitting in this seat as a superintendent of a school? Because I care about the kids. In the end, what's better for the kids? Like, and so the sad thing is, I'm sure he has concern for himself, his own family, his job, you know, and so just so our listeners know, the superintendents are hired and fired by
the board.
Right.
Yes. Which should be beholden to the members of the community.
Correct.
Should be.
Okay. Yes. And I failed to mention that I had started attending the board meetings or tuning into the board meetings. They were all virtual at this point. I got some advice from a friend that, hey, you should maybe check out the board meetings. And this was back in 2020. So I did start tuning into the board meetings. And then I have actually attended the board meetings in person when they opened in person again. And I tell you what, that is the best education you can get. And even if you don't have the time to go in person, most all school districts, I know Irvine Unified does record them. Yes. And you can watch the replay or you can tune in for a live stream if you can't be there in person. But I encourage everyone to not just watch the public comments. That's what you hear most about in the media, but watch the whole thing. So much information is shared and there's so much that you can read between the lines. And that's what's helped me be able to piece everything together and to know what to probe for in public records requests.
Correct. Yeah. So then though you took on you were interested in being involved. You started going to the meeting. Yes. And then at what point
So that year when they finally did open schools back up for us for in-person. So we were virtual. That was 2021, was it? Or no, it started 2020, 2020, 2021 school year. Yeah. So they were virtual for like the first 6 weeks of school. Then we got back to in-person, but there was no volunteer activity allowed. Our PTA was dead.
You're not allowed on campus.
It was such a it was like a zombie apocalypse world, the way campus was, because they had, even though they were in person, they had all these restrictions. It was bizarre.
It was bizarre. And I thought it was really bizarre. And, in meeting you and talking to you, like with your daughter, like the age that she was, like, it just, it breaks my heart, because you think about, that's one individual story, but how did all of these kids get impacted? One of the things, like when you're talking about that, like this weird world, right? Like one of the things that I discovered in Irvine that I thought was so bizarre was that when you went onto the websites of the different schools, they had like bit emojis of the pictures of the teachers. So I was like, this is so weird. I would not send my kid into the hands of someone who I have no idea what they look like. They've got a mask over their face. You're putting your children into the care of this person. Like, this is just weird. Why are you hiding your identity? Like behind a bit emoji and like, what is going on?
It was so bizarre.
That's what they're called, right? Just so somebody doesn't know what those are. Do you know what those are? I didn't know. My kids told me what they were.
Like an avatar.
Like an avatar.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that what it's called? Bit emoji?
I call them avatars. I don't know.
Anyway, whatever. It's a cartoon. It's not a real. So like you wouldn't know your child's teacher at the grocery store. And I thought, like, this is so weird.
I think so many parents just wanted their kids to have an opportunity in class.
Yes.
That they would have accepted.
They overlooked that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was the teacher now of a very strong-willed daughter that also did not want to learn from me. And I was like,
online nightmare.
I mean, this is a lesson too, in just how compliant we become when all options are taken away, because the logic that I put aside in order to get my daughter in class.
Yes.
And the important thing to remember is that there's a third option. There's always a third option. We see things as so black and white, like where it's this or it's that. And there's really like that gray area where there is a third option. And we need to bring that more into our consciousness as we navigate these situations, because people give up a lot of what's important to them because they think, oh, it's this or it's that. No, it's not. There's somewhere else logical in between. Going on with your story, then you got involved somehow.
Yeah, that spring, since there was no PTA, no parent volunteers allowed, I found out that they were doing this Zoom seminar in the spring of 2021. So this would have been the end of my daughter's first grade year. It was called Leaders in Education, a public forum that highlighted the partnership, the great partnership that the city of Irvine has with Irvine Unified School District and with UCI, and then with Irvine Public School Foundation. That's kind of like the umbrella entity. And they brought panelists in to address what they felt were the relevant topics that the community was facing. And Terry Walker was one of the panelists, and board member Paul Bakota. And social justice was one of the topics that they deemed to be of high interest or high priority. And you could submit your questions ahead of time for this panel, right? And I did, because in the midst of learning about this panel, I had found out that in 2020, Irvine Unified School District Board approved a resolution proclaiming Black Lives Matter. Now, it wasn't an endorsement of the Black Lives Matter organization, but the way it reads and the way the heading is, the title of it sounds ideological.
Yeah, you sent me that, and I was deeply disturbed. And under this banner of inclusivity, they're excluding a lot of the community, and this happens over and over again. And when they say social justice, as a Catholic, I've been a part of social justice from when I was raised. This isn't a new idea to me. It seems like this is a new idea to them, but it's really from one particular world view,
correct?
Which is not how our public systems are set up, because they are made for the public, which is varying perspectives. So this form of social justice, this thing that, like, whether you want it or not, to me, it's like they're making you take in a food. They're feeding this to these children.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
And that may not be like the position of the family.
Exactly.
There's a lot of stuff that is just being force fed to students, regardless of who is in the community. I respect that that's their worldview.
They're constantly trying to convince us that this is the new normal and we have to accept it.
No.
And we all know it's not.
It's not. This is abnormal. This is not, there's no basis in logic, like it's abnormal, and we know it, and people feel it, and then they want to do something about it. And you're someone who did something about it. I really want you to talk about then when you became involved, so that you watched that thing and then you got on some council or.
Well, yeah. So I was pointed when I was, my questions that I was asking about social justice, because to your point, social justice means different things to different people.
Mhm.
And I fully support social justice
Mhm.
from a balanced perspective. You have to have reasonable policy.
Mhm.
It can't be one-sided, one direction or the other.
Mhm.
And that's where I see the community, the parents, the families, the school administration, and the board need to work together to figure out what that is. But that wasn't the case, is what I discovered. That wasn't the case at all with what was being pushed and promoted within Irvine Unified.
And they're looking at particular materials.
Yes.
And like, that's the thing that I think listeners really need to key into is
Yeah.
like, you mentioned the assistant superintendent
Yes.
and certain materials that she was
Correct.
using. And you and I understand the buzzwords and the things because we've been around this a little bit longer than a lot of people,
Yep.
but I want people to really understand, like, dig into that, find out, like, okay, these are the materials that your superintendent, your assistant superintendent was bringing in.
Right. Yeah. So I was unsatisfied with how my questions were answered. And then I was pointed to a Zoom session that the Irvine Unified Council PTA held on strides towards social justice within IUSD. And it was facilitated by, as you mentioned, the Assistant Superintendent of Education Services for Irvine Unified, Cassie Parham.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was so alarmed when watching that, but the truth came out. Cassie didn't hold back. She admitted during that Zoom episode that this is a passion of hers and she sees it as her duty to carry this out. And go ahead.
No, but like the other thing that's so interesting is like this intertwine. Like you mentioned a couple things, and I find myself like trying to restrain because I want you to talk. But like when you say like, oh, the partnership between IUSD and UCI, and we know from the trans student hustle, that there's partnership there as well.
Yes.
There's big money that's coming into the state that's going to the district. Irvine has its own dedicated LGBTQ counseling
liaison, community support liaison.
And like these are dollars. And so like the point being that there's a conflict of interest
definitely
that's at play, and that the parents need to really like step in and say, this is a conflict of interest. And so you mentioned Cassie Parham.
Correct.
And you and I was like, wait, this is so Michael Parham, who is on the Capo Unified School Board, used to be on the Irvine School Board. And so there's a relationship. Somehow we are sending a public records request to try and get this information.
Exactly.
But there's a family, but there's something deeper about Cassie, about the family, about the district. So
yes, correct. There does seem to be some underlying connection, which we hope public records will help us uncover.
Mm-hmm. And it's, this is the thing, the dangers of nepotism, within, because
let's get the proof, and then we'll dig deep into that one. But I'm so curious though. So you said that she was very adamant about this was her calling,
correct,
that she saw this as something that she wanted to get through. So what was it that she was saying?
So she said the catalyst for her to launch this effort, this what she calls explicit focus on social justice, was the George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter resolution that the board signed in June of 2020. That gave her wings to go forward with this and the support that she needed. Only problem was she had planned to go forward aggressively, and she partners with the Southern Poverty Law Center, an arm of the Southern Poverty Law Center called Learning for Justice. This is where she's taking all her materials for this initiative from. And they are completely one-sided in their worldview.
I don't know if you've seen this, Angela. Have you ever looked at their website, the Southern Poverty Law Center? They have a whole like hate map, and in your state you can put in and say like, here are the haters. And the thing is like, I think that they're really hateful towards us, like, and feel as though there's no right to have space for any varying viewpoint. It needed to be canceled.
Correct.
So so then you went.
Yeah, she wasn't able to accelerate the implementation of this explicit focus on social justice right away because the board and administration recognized we're coming out of COVID, learning loss has to take priority. So it was fortunate that for the 21-22 school year that this didn't roll out widespread, although she wanted it to. But when things started to get somewhat back to normal at the end of the 21-22 school year, they made big plans for an aggressive rollout in the 22-23 school year, and it's followed suit this year. Well, I was very concerned about what I heard in that presentation, and having researched the materials that she was promoting through this Zoom call, I was taking it in, factoring it in with world events and local events that were happening. I wanted to make sure that my daughter's school wasn't going to buy into this, that you are judged by the color of your skin and not the content of your character. And I felt comfortable writing to my principal because I always like to handle things at the local level, build that relationship at the lowest possible local level first before escalating, right? And so our principal was new to that principal position, not new to being a principal, but new to our school. She had stepped into that role in the midst of COVID, but she was very open-minded. So I wrote to her and I asked her, point blank, is this how it's going to be at our school? Do you see this coming down the pike, where these topics are going to be introduced in the classrooms and children are going to be taught to look at one another's race and, things that I didn't feel were appropriate for classroom learning.
Yeah.
And she said, you know what? No. She gave me the impression that they were very much aligned with my vision of judged by content of character.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to instill in our community members. And she said, but what I really would like is for you to join the school site council.
Right.
So she encouraged me to do that. And I signed on for that. And then I find out that there's actually a whole council behind Cassie's initiative called the Continuous Improvement Council that's at a district level. And so I attempted to start a dialogue with Cassie, and we did go back and forth a little bit. And I laid out my concerns about where she was getting her information from, being one-sided, concerns about this actually being reverse discrimination, especially factoring in the demographics of the community of Irvine.
And I always think like that term reverse discrimination, like it's not reverse discrimination. It's
actual discrimination.
It's just discrimination.
That's true.
And this is the thing is like how I'm saying, under inclusion, they exclude. And this is truly, truly discrimination. And so take us to then, what you saw in there, and then take us to like, how did we get to this document, the document that I started talking about, like how you and I connected.
Absolutely. So I was afforded the opportunity to serve on the Continuous Improvement Council. And the meetings initially were via Zoom because it was still coming out of COVID. And one of our first meetings was really focused in on a book from the Obama administration. There was some sort of grant. They were studying something, and it had to do with social justice. And it was I Am My Brother's Keeper, I think was the name of the book. I actually tried to get a copy of it, and it's no longer available because they've disproved everything in that study.
Wow. Okay.
So the very first meeting I attended on the Continuous Improvement Council, mind you, Cassie says that this is an accurate representation of the community and the community's views. But it just so happens that it's about 75 to 78 members, the vast majority of whom are IUSD staff and administrators. And a couple PTA, council PTA members, and one parent who works for UCI in a social justice capacity.
And they're selected, right?
Correct.
And then one of the things that I've discovered in records is that, sometimes people are paid for these trainings and things. So that I don't know about the staff members and the circumstance, but there are definitely, they're being.
I don't know either.
Yeah. But we can get the record on that.
Exactly. Exactly. So the initial focus of that first year's worth of meetings was more on the social justice and how do we be more explicit about it. It wasn't focused so much on protected classes or gender support plans. That didn't come up at all. It was more our marginalized communities. How are we going to help them to be successful, almost to the detriment of everyone else, right? Those were the things being discussed in these meetings. And the very first meeting was time spent on this survey
Yes.
a speaker from UCI who happened to be a key player in that work. And then I find out, well, the whole thing's been debunked. So we wasted
Yeah.
an
All this
entire,
time.
Well, it's all
yes.
of these experiments being
Yes,
done on children
exactly.
and being done on families because like somebody thinks that's a good idea and then there's no checks and balances. I think what a lot of people don't understand is that school boards are the stepping stone into these political positions.
Yes.
And so they've got people lined up, and you and I spoke about this of how like certain people have been being more like selected,
Correct.
appointed over the years in Irvine. And that's for a different show, different time.
Separate podcast.
But, you know, it all plays in because, you know, what we really need is we need the interest of the community. We need the parents. Like, these are your kids. There's nothing more precious in your life. There's nothing that you have more valuable. So, you know, whatever the ability of, you know, time to invest. You mentioned they can listen to board meetings online, do a public record and send it to us, have conversations with other parents. There's so many different levels of energy that people can put towards stuff.
100%.
And we need you to help us because nobody has time to devote their entire lives. But I just wanted to say like about this appointment thing of like how we didn't know how deep the roots go into this and how many things were happening. And actually, this is probably a blessing and an eye-opening thing that COVID happened, that we see things that are going on that now we can share with other people. And we really want to get to the point. We're going to, I want you to get to the point of the document. And then what we're going to do is we're going to end this segment and then we're going to come back and we're going to have you tell the nuts and bolts of how we do a public records request.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yes. So, in conclusion, that first year that I served on the Continuous Improvement Council was focused on codifying the standards for the explicit focus on social justice within IUSD and establishing how it would be measured. And it was very clear that there would be expectations at every school level, at the teacher level, at the principal level, and at the district level, and that this was non-negotiable. So that's where things left off. And I encourage our viewers to go to learningforjustice.com. Or maybe
and teachers out there, like if you're out there and you're listening, please DM me
yes,
on momsontheground.ca on Instagram, email momsontheground@gmail.com, because like you have standing right now, like if this is against what you believe, you're not forced to do this. We were discussing yesterday a teacher that's in the district that was getting near retirement and had fear about this. People feel like so helpless and powerless, and like you are more powerful than you realize.
Exactly. So teachers, we need you to hold firm in your values. Don't be afraid, and use the community that's there to support you.
I keep drawing this comparison, but it's like of Nazi youth. You know, you had shared a meeting with me, and there was a student who's part of the board who was speaking, and she was talking about how she had been raised Christian, but now she sees that because of these educations that she's getting, that those things were incorrect, and that, you know, she's so grateful that she's had these educations. And it's like, what happened to, you know, the family is responsible. Your family is your primary educator. Like we all have different worldviews, and United States has been a beautiful example of all of these faiths coming together, people not of faith, like, you know, but we knew how to respect each other at large and get along and not try and shove.
Right. We unite over what we have in common.
Right.
And especially now, how can you not unite over the love for our children?
Yeah. Correct. So then I think like, finally, the document. How did you get to this? Right, let's talk about the document, and then let's get to how we teach others.
Yes. So the Continuous Improvement Council picked back up for the next school year, and I was alarmed that all this new terminology that I wasn't so familiar with just made its way to the whiteboard. We met in person. We were now doing in-person meetings, and we were asked to explain evidence that the explicit focus on social justice is being taken seriously within IUSD and what signs we're seeing of it in the classroom, throughout campuses, throughout the district. Well, it was through this exercise that I came to learn about gender support plans and the use of preferred pronouns and safe spaces and trusted adults and LGBTQ plus community support liaison and books on these subjects.
Yeah.
And I thought, what happened over the summer? Because of like when the pendulum really swung, right?
I think we all feel that way. Like what happened?
Yeah.
And we know that there are people that don't, share our viewpoints maybe in the world, but they too, like, I think if they knew the extent of this, they would be like, yeah, what happened? Like, it's not okay that all of this stuff is like that. Any other kind of check and balance is being canceled out and
Right.
you're forced. So go ahead.
I didn't know. And I filed this away in my mind for a while because at this point I had serious concerns about the school district. And I recognized that the wheels are so far in motion. There's no sign that this is going to be pulled back. I need to find a place for my daughter that will nurture her academically, intellectually, preserve her innocence, right? Emphasize character.
And this is what's so frustrating is you were forced to then pull her out of the district. And we cannot use the schools in our district because we're being discriminated against when they're teaching ideologies and things that are not aligned with your family. And you tried and I had a similar experience where I tried within the school where we were to have just like really logical conversations. And this was happening whether I liked it or not. And so when you're forced to flee.
Yes. And it had become clear that the administration was feeling a lot of pressure to buy into all of this, even at our local school, which I thought was very disappointing because that's not who I thought our principal was, but that's how powerful this became. And I got my daughter situated at an amazing school, which has been a blessing, where she's still at today. But I kept in touch with many moms and many of the folks that used to attend board meetings with me. And one of the moms called me up one day and said, "Oh my gosh, Tiffany, I don't know what to do about this, but this teacher has come to me with some information, and I'm very concerned about these letters that are going to go home to families about gender ideology being taught in the classroom, about how
at what age?
Gender is a spectrum. Oh, TK, starting at the TK level. Yeah. And so I said, oh, you know what? She asked, what can we do about this? And I said, you know what? I think I know the point of origin where all of this is coming from. So I said, can you get me? And the whistleblower didn't want to go public or, so we're making every effort to protect the whistleblower, but they did provide us with documentation, right? And I said, okay, so now I'm going to do the public records request to corroborate what I've already seen. So we know this is happening.
Yes.
We know they have the desire to send these letters home. They hadn't yet, but this is what they're pitching to all the teachers at this particular school site and presumably around the district as well, that they want gender ideology to be introduced for people to understand and comprehend gender as a spectrum, that is fluid, and for parents to basically back down and accept it.
Yes.
The thing that's so damaging, like I can't think of anything more damaging than making someone question their own reality.
Yeah.
Like what they know, something so basic, what they know to be true, but they're pulling them into this like concept that like they're not even, this is a little kid. Like go pick on someone your own size. It's out of control.
Well, these are the pieces that I hope people are still listening in, guys. Thank you for hanging in with us because it's so important that we get this part of the information out because I'm talking to people who really don't know that this is happening at all. I'm coming from a different perspective. And people want to believe that people do the right things for the children, especially elected officials, especially teachers. And so it's a really big jump for them to get from that side of the sidewalk into the road where they realize that this is so much deeper.
Yeah.
And so somebody that's coming in, not only were you a mom, but you are an involved mom on multiple levels, right?
Correct.
So it's so important for them to see that it's coming in, that even the teachers and the administration don't feel like they have a voice.
And
it must be strong.
Yeah. And I think it's really sad because I don't think that you or I, either one of us, want to be involved at this level, right? Like it's so sad.
Never imagined that
the
I would
amount
be
of time
in the weeds of this the way
none of us, right? And so, but it's important that we're sharing the information. You mentioned a couple of things of like being at the school board meeting.
Yes.
Listeners, when you go to the school board meeting, make sure you get the contact information of the other people there that are in your camp. If you need help with anything, reach out to us. You wrote a Substack article that I want to also direct some people to, that maybe they can refer friends to
that would be
about
great.
your experience. Where can they find that Substack article?
It's tiffanycraft.substack.com. And I've been trying to chronicle. I haven't updated it as much recently, largely because I'm very involved at my daughter's current school. But I chronicled most all the board meetings I attended. And there was one particular, it was the October 22nd of 2022, the 411 on that board meeting, where I talk about that continuous improvement meeting where I learn of gender support plans, trusted adults, safe spaces. So I include photos.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I was supposed to take photos, let alone publish them. But
well, the thing is that it gave us a really good nugget in your district to show this trans student hustle. If you haven't already listened to that podcast of ours about the trans student hustle and gone through those documents, have a look, because this is something that we see across the state. We need your contributions. We need your information. We want you to be pulling public records. So because this is a group task. We need to do this together.
We can piece the puzzle together by sharing information with one another.
And you know what? Like, this is the thing, is like, there's a reason they have like PG-13 movies, like there's some content that's appropriate for children. There's other content that's not. And even if these people within, for whatever their conflict of interest reasons, they're pushing stuff on minors, that are not, it's not appropriate. And like, you are the primary educator of your child. You are the parent, you are the taxpayer, and so we have to step in and be involved, and sharing things with people in your circle. As Angela was saying, people in her circle, I think it's, people want to remain a little bit in denial. I think that it's more convenient to remain in denial, but it's getting harder and harder to ignore, which is sad, because then we're so far gone. Right. And I am really, one of the things that we were trying to do was promote the Protect Kids of California Act of 2024. We're still gathering signatures for that. But like, the deadline was April 15th to get on the November ballot. And we did not get the signatures, sadly. The signatures were gotten for things like, I think the thing about like, is it bringing back Prop 47, the one about crime, right?
Yes, 47.
So that got the signatures. Like, why are we not protecting our children from like surgical mutilation and just, I don't know. It's mind blowing. We always say mind blowing, right? But okay, so that brought you there. We're going to cut, and then we're going to come back and talk to you about like the nuts and bolts. And we're going to tell, because we keep saying this, we're going to tell people how to do a public records request.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.